So the next topic is the feminine being represented as a post-historical symbol throughout the book. So the female body is kind of acting as a historical void that occurs during Mary's womb being destabilized, and the history of who might be the fathers gets all jumbled up when she kind of gets mixed between Tom, Dick, and Freddie. And the very casual retelling of this in the narrative that Tom tells really shows also the destabilization of the memory of this. So the female body kind of exists as a void because there's no clear answer necessarily, and there's not really a clear answer of why Mary is no longer able to have children later, and why she also thinks that she needs to have a child after she knows she cannot anymore.
There's also like a lack of like ownership, I feel, with like...
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of ownership in who... You are not the father. Her abortion and baby snatching to invert the Christian Immaculate Conception also shows the Marxist pregnancy of the new society. So the labor, for lack of a better term, that she goes to snatch up a baby from a supermarket, that inverts the Christianity morals that are present throughout the book and the Christian scenes that are shown, like the flood that really represents the flood that happens in the Bible. This really kind of flips that on its head in the way that Mary, that's supposed to be this pure figure in the Bible, instead this Mary here is snatching babies at the supermarket, which is not really something Mary from the Bible would do, to say the least. And the feminine metaphors, like the menstrual cycle, the hole, as they say earlier, and we talked about earlier, and Rosa the dredger, tie back to a woman being like a machine, and the loss of linear male-centered history, where this family over time really gets de-raveled, and the Crick family gets de-raveled by these women that come in and kind of mess up their lives, cause Tom to lose his job, and Dick to kind of have a little moment where he has this revelation that he isn't really what he thought he was, and he's a product of incest, and drives himself to basically drown himself. And the woman, machine, and commodity, that's all together as one symbol, becomes a triad that is a site of disruption and possibility within this family.
The symbol of women as kind of like a chaotic force was really interesting to me, because I feel like Swift is kind of suggesting that women have been perhaps like left out of the retelling of history. So this is a way of him kind of like suggesting that although it's the end of history, we are like, women are kind of coming more into the picture, because as you can see like throughout the novel, like Sarah is disrupting the entire family. And then what's Tom's mom's name? I don't remember.
I can't remember.
Tom's mom, as you can see, Ellen. I think it's Ellen. Anyway, Ellen, you know, she's changing the course of life through creating the savior of the world, Dick, and then also Mary, who is kind of having the whole God abortion thing and just kind of disrupting everything, like effectively ruining Tom's life, essentially. So I feel like that was a really powerful, perhaps a controversial statement by Swift.
Yeah, I definitely think it's representing women kind of not being included in the retelling of history, because when they do come in, they kind of disrupt it. And this happens a lot in history. Like, I'm just thinking of the French Revolution, because that's something that Tom is supposed to teach about, but he ended up not doing that. He is retelling it as a man, but he doesn't actually retell it. He just retells his memories. But in world history, I know that we learned that Marie Antoinette, we all know her to say, "Let them eat cake," and she didn't actually say that. That was a man trying to tell the story differently. And I think that is also something that Swift is definitely commenting on.
Yeah.
Just want to keep going. So the commodity as a post-historical symbol also really occurs in this book. So the commodity, basically the baby as a free product from a grocery store, becomes a carrier of revolutionary and sacred meaning. It acts as both a gift from God and as a revolutionary act that changes Mary's life and her perception of the world, where she one day just kind of becomes very religious and says that God told her that she needs to be a mother and have this child. And she will go to any extent really to get that child, even though that she cannot have one herself. But this also parallels Moses as a figure, as the liberator, and as the sacred child, where this child is more or less free because Mary steals him. So he's freed from his family that he was in. She, baby. So the baby is freed from the family that it was in, and Mary is also free, where she can just take things that she thinks she needs. And how this child is kind of represented as like the chosen one, and in that way it's represented as sacred. This commodity also possesses a mystical character, which kind of shows Marxism and is very promiscuous, as Eagleton says, in its exchangeability. This turns capitalist materialism, as going back to Marxism, into a parody of Christian sacrament, which is, quote, wild parody of universal equality, end quote. And this really shows Marxism also being related into this book again, where it's a paradox against the Christian themes that are also throughout the book.
I feel like, I feel like the kind of like the paradox of Christianity is also represented when Tom and Mary's dead baby is thrown in the river, which is kind of parallel to the story of Moses, how Moses was like found floating in a river in Egypt. It's kind of, again, connecting back to the absence and presence of God. It's like kind of undoing that. I don't like being kind of
waiting for something to be like, undone, waiting for
instead of like
resurrection,
finding like this sacred figure, it's being put to death. So